Hello, everybody, and welcome to the AMC gaming series. Today's subject is light and shadow, and we are going to discuss and hear the expertise of a lighting artist about this profession, about this job in game development and creating video games. And today I'm happy to present to you and introduce you to a lighting artist with more than 4 years of experience in 3D art, who started in architectural visualization and currently working in the Owlcat Games, a studio mostly known for titles such as Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, recently announced Dark Heresy, and of course Warhammer 40,000, The Rogue Trader, which has recently sold more than 1 million copies. It's a great success for a game of this genre. And we are going to discuss how light and shadow and creating a volume in video games enhances the experience of gamer, allows gamers to navigate through games. And we're going to hear about that from Maksim Zharkov, our guest speaker for today. And I'm giving the stage to you.
Yeah, hi, Nick. My name is Max, and I'm into 3D art for quite a while now. But I guess it's just a nice little story for beginning of how I got into it. This all started from the film school. I was studying in Bournemouth Film University, and one of my cinematography tutors was also working as a lighting supervisor on the Cyberpunk game at that time. And at one point, like closer to the end of our studying process in university, he gave us a series of lectures on how can cinematographer apply himself in a world of game development. And he talked a lot about lighting, and because it's equally important as for games and for films. So, and here I am giving this lecture and talk on lighting and how it tells us beautiful stories in video games. So, why lighting is important and why I think it's important. I think lighting is kind of unsung hero of video games in a way, and but usually when we think about what makes a game or film unforgettable, we often point like to environments, to characters, to the graphics, the term that people discuss quite a lot when it talks about like new game trailers or new games itself when they're coming out. But graphics is generally, it's very broad, very general term, and more often than not, it's actually a good art direction and lighting that is responsible for this, for what people usually call graphics. So today I wanted to talk about exactly that, how lighting tells its own story, both artistic, both with like using artistic tools that we have at our disposal, and also about some other roles that lighting plays when it comes to gameplay and user experience. So how can light help us navigate the player, how it can comfort the player, or how it can scare him maybe? So let's start with origins of lighting art in games, like where it came from, basically. Lighting in games wasn't always its own discipline. Early on, it was often a task that was split between different departments, like environment artist and technical artist, and maybe level artist. And as the real-time rendering advanced, the need for a dedicated specialist also grew. And it was mainly a shift from lighting being really static in a lot of ways, and more with each year, with each generation of consoles becoming more dynamic and demanding more resources, both from the game studios, from the game developers, and from the game consoles. And and also another important thing in introduction of lighting art and its own profession was introduction to physically based rendering, or PBR as we usually call it. It happened around like a year 2010, and it was basically a physically accurate way to represent an interaction of light and materials that are used in 3D environments. And the introduction of this technology and the demand of cinematic presentation led studios to recognize lighting as its own like standalone role. I'm not exactly sure who was the first one who created the first first job application for lighting artists, basically. But I think it was either of those, Naughty Dog, Rockstar, or Santa Monica, like really big studios that had enough resources to supply themselves with a dedicated lighting artist. And it was basically around the time the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One came around, which was like I think 10 years ago. And so now I'm going to talk a bit about what actually involves being a lighting artist. What are the responsibilities of the lighting artist? So they often include creating an atmosphere and a setting for the visual style of the game through the use of lights, the visual effects, and any form of level geometry that we might find useful inside the game, inside the game engine. And because sometimes like the architecture plays a big role in lighting as well, because it helps like shape the lighting and influence the environment. So we in a lot of cases also collaborate with level artists who are responsible for basically supplying all the game assets in models, props into the level, and dressing the levels with textures and putting it all together. And with level designers who are often responsible for creating the level blockouts and the general flow of the level and creating unique scenarios that happen during the gameplay. So we all work towards this common goal of creating the fun and interesting experience, and that's why we collaborate a lot during production. It's also worth noting that we're collaborating a lot with game designers who are responsible for creating maybe some combat scenarios or specific game mechanics. Maybe they can involve lighting. I'll talk about it later on with some example from other games, how lights might be used as its own like game mechanic. And another big part of our job is maintaining good levels of optimization. This is really important because we develop games for platforms like PlayStation or Xbox, and it is important that our games not only look good, but also run good on those platforms, and on PC as well, of course. And therefore, we need to be careful with how we place our lights and how much lights we place, and maybe how like which lights have shadows and which don't. It affects performance in quite drastically, actually. Okay, so here comes the next slide.
May I ask you a question actually regarding the origins of light? Because to me, it's a complete surprise to find out that this speciality was originated only 10, 15 years ago, because it seems that light is such an important part of retro games as well, like games from 1990s and the early 2000s. You would see some sorts of lighter areas and darker areas. But according to what you say, there was no such a speciality or profession as a lighting artist before, let's say, 2010, 2015. So may I ask you, what, in your opinion, was the reason for that? Was it the technological limitations, or was it some sort of I don't know, maybe people just didn't understand how important it is for art direction in video games, or was it something else?
I think it's definitely a combination of all the things you said. It's at that you said about retro games, right, and how they use lighting. So at that time, there weren't even like level artists or environment artists. They were just game developers as a job. Basically, it was mainly programmers or like people who coded the games. They were not manipulating objects in 3D space like we do these days, like in game agents, when we can take certain object, rotate it, like look around from different ways. They needed to code it basically at first, and then as technology was advancing, became like the separate jobs for level art was created and environment art was created. First it was of course just called like 3D modeling, and not level art or environment art, but yeah, it just took a bit of time to get to this point. Took a bit of time to develop technologies, and also now with games that like really big games, that often open world games or games that have like a lot of scenarios in them, like RPGs or just in general free play gaming, became so the games became like so complex that they need like dedicated specialists pretty much for everything. I think before lighting art there was an introduction of a dedicated jobs for texture artists, the job that used to be done by 3D modelers as well, like 3D artists for quite a while. But now with introduction of the PBR that I talked about earlier, physically correct textures became physically correct materials became really important for the games to look realistic, to look good, basically. And
So if I understand you correctly, it's the development of game engines like Unreal and Unity that allowed basically to put the source of light and direct it to some specific parts of the level that you're working upon, and make it dynamic and make it evolve and change and create a simulation of shadow and light that that navigates the player and helps the level designer and level artist to work on his level.
Pretty much, yeah. It's also the budgets for the games grew with each year because the games produce quite an income these days, luckily for us. And this as well, basically, a studio now, even the small studio now, may think of looking for lighting artists if they want to develop a unique style for the game, let's say. And it helps a lot, as we can see these days. So, yeah, sorry, we stopped at references. So references is one of the most important things actually for every department in video games. It all starts from references, really. It can be anything. It can be a concept. It can be a film. It can be even a book. I don't know, but in my opinion, the best references for lighting, in particular, comes from paintings, because it's they have like the many years of training that like, and we have like the whole history of paintings, and the masters from the past, they were like the first ones to find out all the lighting tricks we still use to this day. And I'm talking about like techniques you might have heard, like aerial perspective, just perspective in general, chiaroscuro, and rambling lighting. I'll talk about those things a bit later, but for now, let's stop at that. But it's also not just for games, but like a lot of cinematographers from films, they also are influenced a lot by painters, like Caravaggio, for example. Like you might think of films like Godfather, for example. Like it's a clear example of use of references like Caravaggio paintings. So to demonstrate the use of references, painting references in games, I have a few examples, and most prominent is, I think, Red Dead Redemption 2, or just in general Red Dead Redemption games, because Red Dead Redemption world is a fictionalized representation of the American West and Deep South, and it's drawing inspiration from various real-life states of America and regions such as Colorado, Montana, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. And in order to find a way to represent the nature of those places in the best way possible, developers in Rockstar decided to go for the paint rally look, which is quite interesting because it's not quite what they used to do with their GTA games, which were quite always pursued like the realism as we know today. But Red Dead Redemption was in a lot of ways inspired by this group of painters that we know as Hudson River School. It was a group of painters, a mid-19th century movement, basically, American art movement, which was mainly focused on landscape painting, particularly of the, as you may have guessed, the Hudson River Valley. And in their works, they relied heavily on the use of aerial perspective and the use of fog and the clouds and the rain, all to translate the sense of scale and the monumentalism of American landscapes. And their paintings played the big part, I think, in the look of Red Dead Redemption, because when working with weather and different atmospheric effects, lighting and technical artists from Rockstar were analyzing those paintings and identifying techniques that they could use to make the world feel more like alive, not only realistic but really alive and dramatic. And in the background of this slide, for example, you could see one of the examples of this, the painter from the Hudson River School. And for example, in this slide, I put it on as just a little game, basically. Try to guess which one is a painting and which one is a screenshot from Red Dead Redemption. So,
well, I'd say that one of the paintings should be in the top right corner with the lake, or is it a screenshot? I think it's a painting.
Yeah, it's a painting. You're right. Yeah. What do you think about the bottom left one?
Bottom left. It looks awfully like a painting, but I think that it's a screenshot due to the quality of rock on the front frame.
Yeah. Sadly, the rock gave it away, but it's actually interesting because it's not even Red Dead Redemption 2, which came out pretty recently in 2017. It's a game that came out on PlayStation 3 era. So it's Red Dead Redemption, the first one. And if you look just at the sky and you look at the clouds and the nice rim lighting around them, you can clearly see like this the pattern like that the painters usually use to create the dynamism and a sense of dynamism in a scene, and just to provide more sort of references for the viewer to analyze the scale. Because we work with 2D images most of the time, we need to find all the way possibles to translate the scale of things that we see in games, which is sometimes quite hard. But with lighting, we can achieve it quite easily, because the lighting, as you can see here, for example, in this example, like shapes the scenery quite dramatically.
So I presume that part of working with light in video games is creating a sheer spaces, a volume in the space, the feeling of the area surrounding the player while he is playing the video game. So when I look at the screenshot, I see huge skies and huge clouds, and I feel as if I'm looking at the actual valley with its perspective and depth, etc. But I really wanted to ask you a question that due to the fact that you're working on games based in Warhammer universe, there's not that much space and safety and beautiful valleys in this world. It's more of a narrow, scary corridors and narrow holes and locations that are supposed to frighten the player. So when I presume that when you are working on your video games, on video games of OCAD Studio, you are not taking Hudson School as the references. So what would be a reference for creating a dark sci-fi style of horror game? Well, not horror, but scary game, let's say.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite an interesting question, but I would say, and it's like the favorite answer of all the artists I think in games, that it's all depends on the context. So we do best what the level demands, basically what the situation demands. Usually, it starts from narrative, and then we look like, okay, if is this location, maybe if this location is a church, I would look into the church lighting, for example, because in Warhammer universe there are a lot of architecture that is influenced by the Gothic architecture. So of course I would look into that. Or you said I won't probably use Hudson River School as a reference, but maybe I will actually. Maybe there are certain worlds or planets that might be suitable for this type of lighting scenarios. So it all depends on the context, but yeah, it's a wide range. Like sometimes the references come like from really like interesting places, like, but yeah, that's
Well, I mean, for example, looking at the trailer of a new DLC for the game, I thought that I saw some sort of inspiration from Byzantine art, maybe, or maybe it's some sort of my imagination running wild. I saw this, very soft light on the statues in an area with a huge statue of the emperor, and the light was really, I'd say, golden, maybe, and maybe that's the reason I have an association with Byzantine art and Eastern Roman Empire and icons and things like that. Because after all, from what I understand, the major inspiration for the art direction in Warhammer as a series, not only just this game, is mostly Catholic art, mostly something Gothic and Catholic, early medieval era. So I was wondering if Eastern European art had some way to influence the artist and level artist and lighting artist and creation of this game.
I wouldn't speak for the whole like art department in that case, but probably it came from many places. Just if the level is like has some Gothic architecture, we don't necessarily look just at the Gothic architecture. We might go like into some places, like as you said, for the Byzantine art. But yeah, as I said, like it usually comes from like the different places, and which we find most suitable for each certain location, basically. Yeah. So, okay, I'll continue the presentation with another topic on what I think is a continuation of work I was working with references, and a topic that is I like to discuss with other artists as well, which is like, what is more important, the graphics or the game direction? Not the game direction, but like the art direction of the game. And I think I have a great example right here, like of how a game, basically, which was created by a relatively small studio, and the art director of this game wasn't even part of the gaming industry before that. He was a graphic artist, and I'm speaking about the game that came out recently, which is called Clair Obscur Expedition 33. And even though like the team that worked on it didn't have a lot of experience, they had a really strong artistic vision, and they end up winning the hearts of many players with I think their unique world that was heavily inspired by French Belle Epoque, chiaroscuro that I talked about earlier, and Parisian Haussmann architecture. And so what about this chiaroscuro that I've been saying quite a few times already? So it's a good moment to talk about it because it's actually hidden in the name of the game itself that I'm talking about. The clair obscur in French means light and shadow, and in Italian is chiaroscuro. And clair obscur is originally it's a painting technique, you would say, an effect of a deep contrast between light and dark, between light and shadow, and was used a lot by Caravaggio. And he placed his lights and shadows so deliberately that it also created the composition. He used a lot of like silhouette lighting, and he influenced a lot of other painters as well, and he still influences us to this day, as we can see, and as I already talked about previously. And the subject of the game, of the clair obscur game itself, is also about like light and dark in itself. It plays a huge role in a story, and not only visually but from narrative standpoint as well, because the game has a lot of plot twists, and some characters are stepping towards the lights and going towards the shadows, like narratively, just like in theater, and you never quite know what they're hiding. And it's really great that they found a way for lighting to support this narrative in a very strong way. So, when speaking about graphics and art direction in this way, I feel like art direction has a much stronger impact on how game feels, and I feel like Expedition 33 is really great example of that. So here I have a few examples from the lighting in this game, and as you can see, it's quite contrasty. It's using a lot of like your character usually stays in a silhouette while the areas of a certain like story important areas are highlighted quite heavily, and the contrast is quite heavy as well. So what I mean about the contrast is like the difference between the highs of the light and the lows of the shadows, basically. So as you can see here, it's quite a big one. Okay, so what's next? Okay, emotional journey through colors. So far we talked a lot about the tonal values, the contrasts, and different lighting techniques, but we still haven't touched the subject of colors, which is also quite a big part of lighting and just general visuals of anything really. And they of course play a significant role in shaping the player's experience, but both from emotional point of view and practical. But we'll get to the practical side a bit later. For now, let's focus on how the colors can help us to tell the story. In my opinion, the perfect game to discuss the use of color is Journey, the game that came out in 2012, and it was during the PlayStation 3 era. Again, it wasn't like highly technologically advanced game back then. Maybe just in terms of how they rendered the sand. The sand was rendered in a really nice way, and a lot of people noticed it when the game came out. The sand looks really nice in game, but also the lighting and the colors look really good. And it's a very short game that takes place in a fantasy world, I would say, that inspired by probably Middle Eastern landscapes and some historical architecture of Middle East. And an interesting thing about this game that it has no dialogues or just any prominent storyline. And the game is, just as the name suggests, a journey towards the mountain that we see at the very start of the game when we just load the game. And the main challenge comes from overcoming the obstacles along the way. And with no conventional way to guide the player, developers of the game, guide the player like narratively, give him like dialogue motivation, some character motivation, like no one is appearing like in the game saying like, oh look, hello hero, you need to go there to do that, like, but here we are. And the developers of the game relied just on the visuals and the sound in order to tell a story, and the gameplay, of course. But they needed to find a way to manipulate emotions, players' emotions, like motivate him, comfort him, or maybe scare when needed. And in order to achieve that, they created the color script basically for every location, and made sure each one of them is different from the other and suits the overall tone of the certain part of adventure. And by looking at the image on the top right, we can see this color script that shows the profile view of all the levels in the game. Even by just looking at all the color palettes, we can already guess what types of environments we will visit through the game. And let's just take a look around like a bit more. So we start in a neutral scheme with calm, warm tones and soft contrasts, and it's a nice entry point for us as a player. Nothing seems to be going on. We just travel forward. We have just one direction so far, which is like a mountain at the background. You can't see it here in this example. Here is just a good example just for the colors and color palettes. So then we move towards the more engaging area of the game as the saturation of the color is rising, as you can see. Like we begin to have some contrasts, like of pink and greens and a bit of more of orange. And then in the third level, we see a classic complementary combination of orange and blue. So orange in the sky and the blue like in a blue fog in the background. Below. And this combination of opposite colors immediately creates tension, which is suitable for an adventures. It's basically suitable like for adventures or like this ride downhill. That take place in this level. So it's a bit of like an action-packed moment, and the color supporting this. So then, after this raid towards the bottom of the mountain, we suddenly change the color palette towards deep blue, and it suggests that something scary is happening. And this underwater caves that we end up in the fourth level of the game, and here we've been followed by some sort of creature, and it's quite a lot of tension happening here. That's why we have this like little pools of lights that are safe for us, and we travel from light to light basically to find safety. And it also guides us into the towards our escape. And as we escape the caves, we find ourselves in a pretty lonely and pretty dismal environment, and the lack of colors and saturation suggests that it might be tragic end of our journey, and as our character is trapped in a blizzard. But we push forward, we come towards the light and towards the blue skies, and our screen fills with hopeful tones once again, and we move towards the summit, which is the main goal of the game, reach the summit. So as you can see, we just experienced the story just by looking at the colors. So I suggest everyone to play the journey if you still haven't. It's also can be a co-op experience if you like this sort of games. So now we come to the point where I talk about the lighting for navigation. And both lighting and color, it can be a great tool to help us navigate the player through the level. What I mean by that, like in the real world, we're used to certain colors representing different things, like green means safe or go, red means stop, of course, or danger, yellow means warning. But this color coding that we have in real life also translates well into video games. But it also has another level to it. So inside the game, we can create our own color codes that the player won't even know about, but he would understand it on like a passive subconscious level. For example, let's say we're making stylized game where the player need to quickly run through the level like some sort of a chase. We as an artist decide that all the floors in our game will be red and all the walls will be green, for example, and therefore making navigation easier, because at a certain point the player will know on subconscious level where he can and where he cannot go, like what is the obstacle and what is the way to go, and he won't waste time on just unnecessary movement and frustration of where to go, or just having like a game over screen all over and over. So a good example of color navigation in those sort of chases and action-packed moments is also games like Uncharted, that are quite heavily packed with action, with chases, and they always have like some sort of landmark, not only architecturally, but also they quite good at shaping those landmarks into good lighting, using fog, using aerial perspective. So you wouldn't so you do exactly what the games want you to do, but not necessarily like with you noticing it. What I mean by that, like it's the example I gave with the walls and the floor is quite extreme in terms of colors, but it's the rule of thumb here is like it should be helpful enough. I mean, the navigation from the artist, it should be helpful enough with how you like helpful enough so the player would feel like the wouldn't feel frustration, but at the same time he shouldn't notice this help, because no one likes when no one likes being guided through the levels. Like people want to explore it naturally and find the right paths themselves. We're just there to make this exploration stage as fun as possible, basically, and engaging. Maybe not fun, maybe scary as well. Okay, so now we came to the point of using lighting as a gameplay feature. So far we talked about conventional use of lighting in video games, but there are some interesting examples of using it in the gameplay and as in game mechanics, as I said earlier when I was talking about collaboration with game designers. For example, like the games like Alan Wake. The game itself tells a story about it's quite a Stephen King-esque style story about the writer who's trapped inside the events of his own book, and he writes murder mysteries. So yes, it's a horror game, and in order to defeat enemies in this game, you need to shine a light at them first, using a torchlight usually. And the enemies are usually represented by some sort of like humanoids, some characters from the books that our character is writing, and they come in the form of this shadow silhouettes. So yeah, it's also we might not just use the torch, but use environment that is using some sort of lights in it. So like, for example, maybe some room has a really bright light in it, and we in order to defeat a lot of enemies, we need to trap them inside the room and turn on the lights. And of course, it's a game mechanic, so it should be fun and engaging, and therefore naturally, like the battery runs out quite quickly in a torchlight, so you need to find some other sources of light for you to fight the enemies, which creates for some scary and fun situations. And yeah, as I said, the game is a horror game. And speaking about the horror games, they usually rely on the same sort of effect that architectures and city planners use when planning like parks and alleys in a city, but in a different way. Like, while the city planners, like, they plan the lights in the parks in a way so they would create like a sort of safe environment for you to feel comfortable when you walk home at night. We use it as a lighting artist, we use it in a completely different way. We use the lights and the shadows to scare people and create like darkness exactly where we need it, and just at the right moments. And of course, of course, we make the lights flicker just for some extra tension, basically. And so yeah, here we can see examples from the Alan Wake games. And you can also see here what I talked about earlier about creating lights and shadows exactly where we need them. So on the bottom right, for example, not the bottom right, sorry, in the top right, you can see this, that the character is standing in some sort of shadow, and in front of him is this bright red spot. So when the player would enter he's naturally invited towards it, but at the same time he's invited towards it because it's a light. It's a light source, so we naturally want to go there to feel safe and comfortable. And in the horror games, it's really important, because you can't just put darkness everywhere and call it a day, right? You need to create some sort of hotspot, some places where you would feel safe. So when you walk out of this safe place, you would feel the danger. So because normally that's what we do. We stay in brightly lit environments all the time, and whenever we go out into the darkness, we don't really feel comfortable anymore. And Alan Wake 2 is a game that utilizes this quite good, I think. So yeah, this next example, which is a bit of a horror game as well in some places. I don't know, at least for me, maybe for you as well. It's a recent Indiana Jones game, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, I think. Yeah, and as we know from the films, that the tombs that Professor Jones likes to explore are often filled with various insects and scorpions. And we also know from the films, and luckily not from the real experience, that these creatures are afraid of lights. Well, hopefully. But in the game, by using a torch that you can find in the cave or like in a tomb, you can scare off the scorpions, and while exploring the tombs or looking for another treasure. It's quite a fun mechanic, although, like as I said, for me it's also quite a bit of like a horror mechanic. I think I also remember this the similar mechanic happening in the Metro games, Metro Exodus, I think it was, where you would use the lighter to scare off the spiders as well in certain levels. So, and yeah, of course, when talking about lighting, you can't forget about the stealth genre. It's the whole genre of games that relies on lights or its absence, to be more precise. And I'm talking, of course, about the games like, for example, like Thief. In here example, we can see Thief 3. By staying in the shadows, you basically can go unnoticed, and by the time when you reach when you come out to the light, that's the place actually which is not safe for you. So before we talked about the horror and how we want to be invited and attracted towards the light, but in here it's completely opposite situation, where we play as a thief or maybe some secret agent. Staying into the dark is actually much more safer for us. Okay, so
I just wanted to ask you and summarize up all this incredible amount of information that you gave, because it's always so fascinating to hear how many nuances and details and small, at the first glance, insignificant moments are there in every speciality and profession, in every genre. Because according to what you say, light can be a navigational tool. At the same time, it can be a way of storytelling, of narrative design. In horror games, everything in the darkness is scary, and the light might be a trap that you are being lured into as a player. In stealth games, everything turns upside down and you're hiding in the shadow, and the shadow is a safer spot than the well lit part of the level you're exploring while playing. So it's such an incredible combination of minor and major decisions whenever you're creating a light for one specific encounter or level in a video game. So I just really wanted to ask you, before we get to a list of games that you'd like to recommend, how exactly do you take these decisions? How you decide upon where to put a soft light, where to put harsh light, where you want to make it flickering, and where do you want to make more darkness than light? So how the algorithm of this decision is evolving while you're working on level in video game?
So just as I said before, it all depends on the context. And yeah, but it's actually like the first, I would also always look at the concept. I would play the level, even at the blockout phase. I would see what it's trying to tell us, and what sort of references I might come across. I might look into different places, and then I would start working. I would just not only just place my lights, but like also decide, as I said before, deciding like how to guide the player, and it all come together like in a really interesting form that like you do it like in a sort of like in a certain amount of passes. Like you would never go like, okay, I'm gonna light this until it looks perfect like in one day. No, you take your time. You do like a first pass, like navigation pass, maybe like the color pass, or you would do like, if it's a horror level, let's say the most important thing would be finding those places where we want to attract the player the most, and where we want to create this safe haven with lights. And with stealth games, it might be a completely different situation. Like I never worked on stealth games, but it's a completely different environment to work in, and you would probably be more focused on shadows rather than lights, and also look into how make the shadow spaces feel interesting, and how, if the whole game in a shadow, then how would you attract the player towards the light? Like it's different challenges that you come across every day, and yeah, it's challenging and it's interesting and it's engaging. That's what I like about it. Yeah, so now we have on the screen the list of games which I think are good for lighting, and I'm talking about all the things I said before, like about navigation, about the atmosphere, about the colors, about the emotions that the lighting produces in the game. And some games I already talked about, like Clair Obscur and Alan Wake, but some other I think are quite good examples of use of all the things I talked about. And this actually concludes my presentation. So thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, I would gladly answer it. If you have more questions, or if you
There
have some
are actually questions from the audience. So there's first question. What do you think about the light's role in the making a sense and feeling of space and spacing?
Okay, so again, all the things I talked about, like that applies to games, or they also apply to any sort of medium that works with moving images, but also it applies towards the real life environments. If the question is about the, real life spaces, if you mean, I'm not sure if you're asking about the space. Yeah, but
No, I guess it's space, like a space in the specific area.
Yeah, that's what. That's what. That's the road spacing. Yeah. So yeah, all the terms I said before applied, maybe not to like those dramatic high points. Like we wouldn't use like overly dramatic contrast lighting in real life environments. Usually, some people would like it probably, but usually we create the environments. The lighting is a bit more softer when we like work with real life environments, and just to comfort the people that live in it, or maybe it's a working environment. So let's say when in office you would never use like a really warm lighting that would remind you of like the fireplace, because no one works no, like you don't want to create the office space that people would just be chilling, right? Like you would people to be
They
motivated to
feel
be.
too comfortable in.
Yeah. So it's all the same rules applies, but applies towards the real life environments, but just not to such a dramatic
And
limits as
for
well.
instance, in video games, when you create, let's say, a couple of areas before you encounter a boss fight or something like that, so you would apply the same rules. For example, in a room where just some guy was living or is living at the moment, you'd use a more neutral sort of softer light, and then you'd use a more contrast and dramatic light in the actual encounter, or it varies from case to case.
Yeah, it varies. Again, it's all depends on the context of like what type of like fight will it be. Is it a fight against evil? Is it a fight like I don't know if it's a trap, or a lot of things might come across, but we always look for ways to make it seem interesting, and maybe suggest some things through lighting, maybe underline a certain message, like maybe some players wouldn't even notice it, but we always try to put like meaningful things, so like our choices, artistic choices or technical choices would matter for the story.
All right. There is a second question. Do you know about Albertus Magnus's philosophy of light? Light is the first form, and so on. Personally, I'm not aware about that. Maybe it has something to do with the biblical light, or something like that. Like, let there be light, and light of the first day of creation of the world, and something like that. But if you're aware, I'm sorry for interrupting that.
Actually, I'm not familiar with Albertus Magnus's work, but I have some sort of ideas. Just like light as a first form, I guess it's some religious study about lighting, maybe about churches. But I'll probably take a look if it's might be useful.
Well, from a more practical perspective, when the video game is created, I guess the biblical rule is not applied. I guess you don't start with light and shadow; you just apply it when some basic blockout is created already. So it twists the original formula a little bit.
It's a good question, because it also depends, but I would say it depends not on the situation, but on the studio, I think, because some studios, they like to have their blockouts feel as polished as possible, even though they're just blockouts, just like a Lego pieces that they test the ideas. So, for example, when I said about when I was talking about Uncharted games, I think they use lighting. They do some like basic lighting inside their blockouts when they testing out the environments and action sequences, because then they have like understanding of how important it is for also providing the player with necessary information during the gameplay. So but some studios, they they keep their blockouts as simple as possible. So we don't start with usually the lighting comes a bit later in the process. I mean, pretty much in the end of the process, to be honest.
All right, there's a third question. What about cases when shadow and light replace each other? Technically, in animation and mechanics, i.e. shadow takes an active role upon light, like becoming the dark light or something. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, it's a kind of, it feels like it's a philosophical question, and maybe I would find an answer for that. And if I read the work of Albertus Magnus,
No, it's a separate question.
but,
I
no,
guess
just
it means
joking.
the situations in video games where, for example, there's more darkness in the level or in the particular stage of the game, so the light kind of takes the place of darkness in game design of this level. In some video games, especially horrors, there's sometimes situations when everything is covered with darkness and you see a brim light in front of you, so you could follow it, like in Max Payne, for example, the old games, like Max Payne first games. So I guess it's an interesting question regarding how it can change your perspective, because usually you are more familiar with situations when there's a 50-50 of light and darkness situation, or it's more light and less darkness in the shot. But I guess sometimes there's a situation when basically they change their places and light becomes dark, or, well, have you ever encountered situations like that?
I would say it's never like a 50-50 situation of like light and dark. The most beautiful balance I feel like in any sort of art usually comes from like this 80/20 rule, or like maybe not like every time, but it's you need to find the rhythm basically, and it's again depending on like a certain location and how you could establish this rhythm throughout. So but yeah, the proportions of the lighting are never like 50-50. It's quite it's actually a bad proportion for nearly everything in art. You don't want two pieces of the of like, I don't know, you don't want composition to like be fighting each other. You want like have some main point of attraction, some smaller pieces, and some really small like details. And with lighting, it's pretty much exactly the same. Like so when talking about lighting the darkness, so I was saying earlier that you don't want to make the horror game in like pitch black, and you need some sort of bright spots in order for you to feel the real darkness. Like through this contrast, you would feel how dark the dark actually is. Like, sorry for the weird phrasing, but I think that's how it is. Yeah.
I think it's just a human nature that you can't discuss light and darkness without getting philosophical at some point of time. So it's so deeply in our culture, in our belief system, that I think it's completely unavoidable. But anyhow, for now, we have no other questions. And before you conclude, I just want to say thank you for being with us. Thank you for telling the story here at AMC Gaming Series. I think it's very important to include not only better known professions and better known specialities of game development, but also those that are lesser known to many people who are interested in video games and potentially in the video game development, because it's not only about game designers and level artists and screenwriters and coders. It's also about hundreds of people making their job, making their own artistic choices, adding a lot of value and meaning and semantics into each video games that we're playing. And it's a really, really interesting perspective on video game development. So thank you so much, Maxim.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.